P&G released their fiscal 26 results on July the 29th. Their fiscal year ends June the 30th. And with that, they also shared some interesting surfactant relevant news. Bottom line on the results, they are flat. While they reported a 3% growth in net sales, when you strip out currency and things like that, organic sales grew by 1%, and all of that was price. Volume for the company for 26 versus 25 was flat. In fact, the only business segment out of the 5 segments which saw any volume growth was beauty, and that grew its volume by 4%. By the way, I'm going to make these slides available for download below the video. Check out the link, and you can study them more closely there. All right, so some other things. Core gross margin was compressed, as you can see, by 40 basis points to 50.7%. Core operating margin was off by 70 basis points on the year to 23.6%. So let's dig into a couple of segments which are particularly surfactant heavy. First off, beauty. About $16 billion in sales out of the company's $87 billion total. As mentioned, it's the only segment to show volume growth last year. They mentioned in the analyst call that hair, skin, and personal care each grew organic sales, that's on a dollar basis, in the mid-single-digit % for the year. This is a focused growth area for the company, and they do expect to focus R&D, in particular on core product performance improvement. The next segment is fabric and home care, which did in total about $30 billion in sales. Again, volume flat. A 1% organic sales growth was all price driven in that segment. Earnings for the segment fell by about 4%, which was the largest decline in earnings out of all 5 segments. European fabric care was mentioned particularly as a weak spot, and fabric enhancers as a bright spot. However, in this fabric and home care segment, there are two big pieces of surfactant relevant news. News piece number 1, Tide Evo, which we've talked about extensively on this channel. In fact, we did a 1-minute review, and we've discussed it in the blog. Tide Evo will officially be launched full scale across the country in fiscal 27, which we're in now, and that will be supported by presumably a pretty big marketing budget, so watch out for that. News item number 2, even bigger. Tide Original Liquid was reformulated last year. In fact, they put out a press release about it in September of last year. According to management on the earnings call, they improved performance of the product while keeping the retail selling price the same. And part of the reformulation was a 25% increase in total cleaning surfactant content and a 40% increase in non-ionic surfactant content. And they claim to have seen a turnaround in this reformulated product, this Tide Original Liquid reformulated product, a turnaround from declining sales to sales growth of the reformulated product in the high mid-single digits %. So, pretty interesting result. What we've done is, and I'm going to write more about this in more detail in the blog, but if you go back and look at the ingredient list prior to the reformulation for Tide Original Liquid and compare that to the ingredient list today, you're going to see that the results are pretty clear. In the original ingredient list, the top 3 products are, and I read here to make sure I get it right, in the old Tide, the top 3 products in the IL are 1, sodium and MEA C10 to 16 alkyl benzene sulfonate, right? That's a mix of sodium and monoethanolamine salts of LAS. That's the number 1 ingredient. Number 2 is C10 to 16 parath, right? So that's your non-ionic, your alcohol ethoxylate. And number 3 is sodium lauryl sulfate. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff, obviously, which we may or may not talk about in the blog. All right. And then the new Tide reads, and I'm reading here, number 1 ingredient, C10 to 16 alketh. Now, if you recall, alketh is the new inky terminology for what we used to call parith. So they've moved that parith non-ionic up to the number 1 spot. Okay, it's the same stuff, new inky name, same stuff. That's number 1. Number 2 is SLS, sodium lauryl sulfate. Number 3 is your sodium and MEAC 10 to 16 alkyl benzene sulfonate, right? Your sodium and MEA salt of LAS. So to me, this seems pretty significant, right? Now, as I said, I'm going to dig into this in more detail, but let's just say, I'm going to do back of the envelope here. Let's just say the non-ionic went from, let's say, 10% of the bottle to 14%, right? There's your 40% increase. Or maybe 12% to 15%, right? So again, the 40% increase. I don't know the exact numbers, obviously. But roughly speaking, that's a 4 to 5%, 4% percentage point, right, increase in the non-ionic content of Tide Original Liquid. That seems to me to be something of the order of tens of thousands of tons of additional non-ionic, additional alcohol ethoxylate in this one product, right? If anyone can do better math or knows something that's in the public domain, please feel free to share that in the comments or drop me a line on the tip line. But anyway, more to come on this. In terms of an outlook, and let's take a look at the slides again here, P&G is looking at continued growth, hopefully, this year in organic sales, continued cost cutting. They're about halfway through a major cost cutting program, and I assume that will mean continued layoff staff reductions. And they say that the Tide liquid method, that is improving a base product at the same retail price, they see that as a template for other big brands in the portfolio, which I assume means across the portfolio in beauty care, other areas, as well as in fabric and home care. So let's see, should be quite interesting. Thanks again for watching this video. Drop your comments below and your feedback below, and we'll look forward to talking with you again soon.